James, it's great to spend the morning with you at Futura Park. It's sort of our first interview with you here since you've moved back from Joburg. Tell me news about the stable, about how you're doing and how you see the season building up so far.
Thank you, Finch. It's a pleasure having you here. It's nice to have our first interview together. Stable's in good form at the moment. I'm very happy with how things are ticking over. We've got quite a young yard, which I think is very exciting, a little bit of the unknown and what's to come for the future. I think we've got some nice, exciting youngsters to look forward to. Obviously, we'll know more once they really start racing a bit more. But I'm very happy with how things are going at the moment, and I think we've got an exciting season to look ahead with.
We've obviously had the Race Coast Matchroom Stakes, and now we're going to head into Hollywood Bets Kenilworth for the first future seasons. I wanted to talk to you about sort of the young horses that are starting to put their hand up for those kind of races. In particular, Chasing the Rainbow, Star Major, Captain West. How do those sort of fit into your race planning and what you think of them and where you might see them run?
Well, we'll start off with Captain West. I think he's always been a horse that's just needed a bit of time and maturity. Not exactly a youngster, he's 4 now. Still acts like a bit of a baby when he comes down the track, but I thought he was just a horse that just needed the maturity and the time. I thought we were always going to, he was always going to be a horse that was going to be looking for a mile and get there eventually. I think now as he's turned 4, he is looking for that kind of ground. And I think, going into the small kind of features, I definitely think if he finds the right kind of field and he's carrying a good weight on his back, I don't see why he couldn't get into a couple small features this season. So, yeah, it's exciting with him. With Star Major, he looks to be a very promising 3-year-old. His form line standing up quite well, and I think as we've just let him blossom over the winter, he's really matured into a nice looking individual. Also certainty of the unknown, as there's a lot of unraced 3-year-olds that still need to step out, but he looks like a promising little horse for our feature season, so we'll just have to see how he progresses. Chasing the Rainbow, also very light raced horse, 4-year-old, still learning a lot of the trade. I think he's only had his 8th start as of yesterday. He's just been over racing a little bit and doing things the wrong way as of recent, but we plan on getting on top of that. And I think if he just comes back to himself and we get him back to what he was doing before he went on his little rest after the winter, I think he'll be an exciting horse to look forward for the future, especially over ground.
In that kind of conversation, do we talk about 006 there, North Point, obviously horses that sort of are going through the grades and should be putting their hands up for future races as well?
No, 006 is doing very well. We always thought he was a bit of a puppy as a 3-year-old. Now, he's had the race time and the maturity, and I think as he's getting older, he's just going to mature into much more beautiful and strong individual. He's a gutsy kind of horse. He's always up for a fight when it comes towards the finish, and I think there was nothing to discredit him over the winter, especially running on the winter course. He's a horse that's always going to appreciate the longer straight, so I think when we come back to Kenilworth summer course, I think he's really going to be a nice horse, and I think as he just progresses through his races, I think he'll also be a horse to watch over the feature kind of races for the distances.
And then, we sort of talk about your class horses that have been proven. Montpetit Cherie comes to mind. You obviously have Festival Chic that might be just around there. She ran a good race in that Schweppes Diana Stakes. Where do those 2 fillies fit? Does Fatal Flaw come down and compete, or do you sort of keep them all separate? How does that work for you in terms of planning?
Oh, well, for me, I think Fatal Flaw's just taken better to Joburg, which is, reason why I opted to leave her there. She's doing very well back at home. We've just given her a nice long layoff. She had a very hard 3-year-old campaign, and you can't discredit what she did on paper by any means. I think she's only a filly that's going to improve as well as she turns 4, and I think we've got a lot of fun still to have with her. So you'll definitely see her during the Cape season, but I think we will plan to keep her as a raider. Montpetit, she's really flourished as a 4-year-old. I think just her class as a 3-year-old is really what carried her. We've got her on top of her. She's had a few little niggles in the past, but she's really relishing it now, and I think she's also going to be a very big horse to watch during the whole season.
Okay, and then in terms of Artiste, what would you plan for T? She's striking grey. You see in the morning, you pick her up, and I think she's got a few fans as well. Where would you like to plan her?
So we've actually got a race coming up for her now in the middle of October. She's really relished also coming back from Joburg. You know, she's had a nice little growth spurt and she's put on a good amount of mass. She's really enjoying being back in the Cape, and you can see it in her work. You know, we had her at gallops last week and she put up a really good gallop. So I think there's a lot to look forward with her, especially over the sprint features. You know, I think she's a filly that's also just with time and race experience is starting to enjoy herself more and more. So I think in the smaller features, especially over the sprints, you'll see a lot of her this season.
Cool. And then, you know, some interesting names here. Fox on the Run, Reed Petite. I think there's a lot of talk on these two. If you want to put in any other horses that sort of make up that sort of arsenal of yours, where would you sort of see them and sort of potential that you see with them?
Well, you know, Reed Petite is a really well-bred filly. Very good family. You know, she's always just had a touch of class about her since she's arrived in the yard. You know, in her last run where she won on debut, the gallop leading into that race, she was still very green in the gallop itself, but taking everything in her stride and really finished her gallop off well. So I think she's a classy individual. I think she'll definitely be one to watch for the feature season coming up. Obviously we'll learn a little more about her after her next start on Wednesday, but you know, I think she's a really exciting and promising filly for the season.
And then in terms of possibly Met runners, King's Plate runners, I think we should be talking about Pomodoro's Jet, Otter Lucan, and obviously we have Fatal Flaw that could potentially slot in there in terms of how they fit. Is that correct in my assessment? Where would you sort of have those two?
Fatal Flaw, I don't believe she's a 10 furlong horse. I think Mile is her bread and butter. Pomodoro's Jet, we're going to see. We've had a few niggles with him at the end of last season, so I just want to get him, you know, back to being 100% spot on and perfect before we really decipher where we want to go with him. I do think his best trip is probably over the mile as well. And then with regards to Otto Lucan, I think, you know, we'll just have to gauge how he goes, but at this moment we are preparing him for the Summer Cup. And yeah, I think there's some exciting older horses, and with regards to the youngsters in the yard, there's still a lot of unknown youngsters. Like you mentioned, Fox on the Run, I think he's a nice horse, and I think just with racing experience he can only but improve. And then there's also a nice little filly called Boozy Susie. She does not discredit herself by any means over the 1250 on debut. You know, she came from last and ended up finishing, I think, 4 or 5 lengths back. So I was very happy with those runs.
I've got a name that I can't pronounce, James. Count Hootie-Coo.
Correct.
A lot of U's. What's the plan? What's the game plan?
He's also always been a big puppy, Troy. You know, he showed me a lot as a 2 and a 3-year-old, but I always thought he was going to be that late kind of bloomer. 4 or 5-year-old is really where you're only going to see the best out of him. So, you know, in his run in Durban in the July Consolation, you know, I think he still ran a very credible race considering how green and dumb and running he was. You know, he went up in the Progress Parade recently against you know, Parisian Walkway, carrying level weights with him, and ended up beating him by a length and a half, needing the run. So I think there's a lot of promise and a lot to look forward for with this horse in the future. I think he's only uprising now and improving with racing. So I think as the penny slowly drops with him, I think there'll be a lot of fun to come for the future.
We almost forgot about Raven Black, and next to him Surjet. So 2 top horses that have feature races in them. Talk to us about plans, concrete plans. Where are you running them?
Raven Black I've got entered coming up in the 15th. There's a 1,000 meter. I'm not quite sure if I'm just going to run him yet. He only had his first grass gallop back last week, so I'm just going to assess and see how he goes, but he may well run on the 15th. And then future plans for him would definitely be the Southeaster Sprint into the Merchants, and then from the Merchants into the Cape Flying. He's very exciting also for the features. I think you have not seen the best of him just yet. I think the move to bring him down to Cape Town is going to help him a lot, especially soundness wise. And yeah, I think there's a lot to come from him this season if we can keep all things well with him.
And he's got to compete against Surjet. So
No, Sergey's a war-torn veteran. He knows the game back to front. You know, he's been there, done that against all the top horses. Isibunguvungu, Thunderstruck, Lucky Lad. You know, he's been there with all the top grinders. So I wouldn't discredit Sergey at all. You know, he had a bit of a hiccup within his season last season as well, and he only really started to come back to himself towards the end of it. He's come back now. He's absolutely relished it. If you didn't know his age, you would say he's a 3 or 4 year old. So yeah, I think he's also going to be a good horse to watch for the season.
And then your number 1 box that I actually saw Futura and a few others in before is Mfula currently. Can't leave Mfula off the list.
No, he ran a very good race yesterday, Troy. You know, we've gulled him, we've given him the time off now in the winter. He's really relished it and enjoyed it. Thought he ran a very creditable race yesterday. You know, he needed the run a bit, and I think over the trip, I think he's definitely going to be a horse to watch this season.
So quite a few horses. It seems like the season's going to heart up. We're going to see some horses putting their hands up, and others maybe you have to change your plan. But excited to get back to Hollywood Bets Kenilworth.
Yeah, very excited to get back there. You know, it's obviously where all the feature race fun really starts, and it's nice to see all those young 3-year-olds also come down. You get to get a better idea of what's really happening in the stable, who's really, you know, got the bombs of the season, if you want to say that. And yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting season going forward.
Thanks, James. All the best with your prep, and I'm sure we're going to be finding you in the winner's box.
No, thank you, Troy.